Hi, I'm Dr. Boyce Watkins from Your Black World, and I like to have conversations with just brilliant people that I respect. And about my partner in crime, Yvette Carnell, and we haven't had a chance to talk for a while. Yvette, how you doing?
Pretty good. How about you?
I'm doing very well, very well. Now, just so people should know, a lot of people know about your site, breakingbrown.com, but if you don't know now, you know. First of all, I want to ask you that, how you been doing this week? You been busy? What's been on your mind?
I've been busy. I've been bothered. So we'll talk about that.
You're always bothered. Always complaining.
Oh yeah, it's a lot to be bothered by.
See, that's the problem. See, if black people would stop complaining, then everything would be okay. We would have peace.
I know.
We would have peace.
Victims all of our lives. That's what it is.
Just lame. But this week I was doing some media stuff on the president's new initiative, My Brother's Keeper, which there's so many emotions, so many thoughts that come into that. I mean, you and I talk about these kinds of issues all the time. We talk about the state of black men. We talk about what's happening in our communities. And apparently the White House has finally decided to kind of jump in the fray on this. And I want to open that door for them. I don't want it to sound like they're not invited to talk about this issue, because I think it's a long time coming. But you had some thoughts about this. You saw a video by Touré, who I've referred to as the Kim Kardashian of social commentary. And you saw him talk about Obama's initiative, and he was actually more critical than he's been. I mean, it's a surprise because MSNBC is usually very supportive of the president. What was your take, on the initiative and on what Touré had to say about it, and just, any other thoughts that come to mind in general?
Well, first, in terms of how I feel about the initiative, I'm not happy about it. And a lot of people say, well, you've kind of called on Obama all this time to do something for black people. So why doesn't this make you happy? Why doesn't it excite you? Well, because Obama has replaced governmental action with charitable giving. Those are not the same thing. When you look at what created this situation that black people live in now in terms of these disparities, it's systemic racism. And systemic racism was made possible by public policy. So the only way to redress that is with public policy. Now, if Obama had offered a charitable, arm of this thing along with a legislative push, I would have been happy. But right now, what you're telling me is that, fighting for black boys isn't your priority, or that shouldn't be Congress's priority. Congress's priority should be dealing with other issues. Yes, you can bail out Wall Street. Yes, you can give subsidies to farmers in the billions. Yes, you can subsidize prisons. Obama has increased the budget for the Bureau of Prisons. But no, in order for black boys to get help, they can't get help from the government. They have to get help from charitable organizations. So black people are now like this big basket case, this big charitable case, where Obama is fundraiser in chief and his job is to go around begging for black boys. That's not what I expect from the president of the United States of America. If he wants to be fundraiser in chief after he's gone, after 2016, so be it. But that's not what I expect from the president. Now, in terms of Touré, let me just say something that I'm observing throughout this whole process. What I see is a bunch of black journalists, pundits, academics who are, as a Facebook friend of mine said earlier, just kind of jumping ship. It's like everybody knows that the ship is sinking, so the rats are just kind of jumping off the edge of the boat. That for me is a problem. Touré is the same guy. Let's just put this in perspective. Touré on MSNBC basically came out and was critical of Obama and said, this is systemic racism is the problem. It's not just personal responsibility. Well, Touré, you're the same guy who brought us into this conversation about a post-racial America. Are we in a post-racial America? And, the white media just ate it up. But you brought us there. And now at the end of Obama's term, where he's about to be a lame duck, you want to come back and be like, well, yeah, systemic racism exists and, something should really be done about it. In 2014, if you wanted to do something about it and make that case, you should have made that case earlier. We all knew who Obama was. When Obama made that speech during the campaign where he talked about black men and deadbeat dads on, what was it, Father's Day at a black church? We knew where this bus was headed. That's when we should have called him to the carpet and say, listen, we're not doing this anymore. We're not going to allow you to have a sister soldier moment again. We're done with that. Stop that. But now you want to come 6 years in and have this conversation? No, you're too late to the game to help black people at all. And Touré's not the only one to do it. He's not the only offender.
Sorry about that. I was talking and nobody could hear me because I had my mic turned off. I try to do, just in case people are wondering, I do that so you don't have to hear me smacking and breathing and all that while Yvette's talking. But you're talking about Teray's book, Who's Afraid of Post-Blackness, and that's a book where he kind of began that conversation about a post-racial America that kind of became a buzz term for about 3 or 4 months until people started seeing how the president was being treated and the fact that he was a black man, that Congress didn't forget that he was black, America didn't forget that he was black. I will say that, your sentiment on the president's initiative, I think you make a lot of very accurate points, things that I hadn't really, considered. But what I will say is that I probably wasn't as harsh on the president on this as yourself, largely because I have to give him credit for the fact that, he did use the bully pulpit to talk about this issue. He did make it front and center. It wasn't something that was kind of done off to the side, as one of his quiet little things that he's working on. I mean, it was a flagship sort of thing. And there is some money behind it, no matter where the money comes from, government, corporations, et cetera. There is some sort of funding there. I do think that obviously there are clear limitations, right? I mean, number one, you have to, here's another thing I have to give the president credit for. I mean, here I am, actually applauding some things I see out of the White House. And I feel like I have to do that because I've been so clear about things I did not like, and I wanted to force myself to at least try to embrace the things that I do. And one of the things I did like also was that when the president gave his speech about the state of young black men in America, he leaned a little bit more, he created a little more balance when it came to that whole personal responsibility crap that we saw on Father's Day. I mean, that Father's Day speech was atrocious because what you're doing is you're blaming the bulk of systematic inequality on black men themselves who have been hammered by this inequality. I mean, it's all over the place. In fact, I know a lot of educated PhDs who are black males who can't get jobs, so it's not just a matter of working hard and getting education and doing the things you're supposed to do. Sometimes the opportunities are just not there for you, and you have no remedy to get help when you deal with those situations. Now, when I heard Teray's remarks, I don't think he was off base in terms of mentioning the structural inequality. I think he mentioned jobs. He mentioned the war on drugs, which you saw Russell Simmons and I have tried to push on. The guns. We have communities where it's easier for black men to get guns than it is for them to even get an education. And I think that your point, it definitely hits home to me. Is you're talking about the fact that we need legislation. We need things that are really going to knock down those barriers. We don't need to treat black men solely as a charity case. We're not charity. We're not weaker than other people. We're not less ethical than other people. We don't love our kids less than other people. We're not less worthy of the same opportunities as everybody else. But the fact is in America that there is a huge gap in opportunity. Now, one thing that I think is also important too is, and this is interesting. Now you're going to trip out on this. I heard Bill O'Reilly referring to the gangster culture and how that sometimes can inhibit the progress of some young black men. I actually agreed with him to a point that some of this gangster culture that does come from certain types of music does affect our kids. For example, if you follow the way teenagers dress and talk and act and whatever, people didn't start wearing dreadlocks till Lil Wayne was wearing dreadlocks. I mean, people emulate these things. The reason Rick Ross gets paid or was going to get paid $5 million to put on Reebok shoes is because they knew that he's an urban influencer. When he wears a certain shoe, teenagers wear a certain shoe. When he uses certain lingo, teenagers use that lingo. When he talks about things like date rape, drug use, violence, whatever, some teenagers do emulate that. I've seen that up close. And I think the gangster culture is something that should be stamped out. Now, here's where Bill O'Reilly needs to go further in his argument. He needs to understand that this gangster culture is not something that's created by black people. It's, the faces of the gangster culture might be black, but the people behind it that are funneling money into the gangster culture are these big white corporations, these Universal Records and these other companies that will take a toxic hip-hop artist and elevate him above a more productive, a more positive hip-hop artist like an Immortal Technique. So I think that there is room in this conversation for some discussion about the personal responsibility element. I don't believe in conversations that are solely built on believing that changing structural inequality will make everything better. I think that you can talk about personal responsibility. You can talk about culture. I do believe that there's an element of the black male population that is a little bit sick. But the thing that we have to also understand is that it all goes full circle. The sickness was not created by us. It was created by corporations that are designed to exploit us and to sprinkle our children with messages that promote genocide. And so you can't tell me in a million years, again, I've been a black man a long time now, and you can't tell me that these cultural elements don't have an influence, because I've seen this. I've almost been shot by other brothers. I've seen other brothers go down the drain or engage in criminal behavior. Or I heard my older brother before he died tell me that he doesn't want to listen to this rapper talk about smoking weed because it makes him want to smoke weed too. So those influences do play a part. And I think that we have to talk about this in its entirety. So if the president really wants to help, he needs to make sure there's plenty of research so that people can really give him honest solutions on this problem and not just look at black men as a one-dimensional charity case. So I'll let you get the next word in, Yvette. I know I said a lot.
Well, here's the problem I have. I have a problem with pathologizing black behavior. People say, well, I almost got robbed by a black man. That doesn't mean that black men are the only people that rob. And the thing is, there's nothing, even though Ta-Nehisi Coates from the Atlantic and I have had some I've disagreed with him on a lot of things, but he has said something that I think is very true, that there's nothing wrong with black people that couldn't be ended with the end of a white supremacist structure. If the white supremacist structure fell to its knees today, in terms of the way things are created, everything comes together. So the idea that, that this should be a personal responsibility conversation is just something that I don't buy into, because you have the same, you have to look at the facts, right? I was watching the Chris Hayes show the other day, and the dude basically on the show, the guy says a black college graduate will earn about the same as a white high school graduate in his lifetime. That is white supremacy. That is racism. There is no reason that a black college grad and a white high school grad should earn the same thing. That cannot be fixed by fixing hip hop. That cannot be fixed by just telling Lil Wayne to sit down. So I think, sure enough, I have problems with the hip hop culture. I have problems with that. I think I've expressed that. But I think if we focus too much on that, we focus on something that is not the problem. The problem, a bigger part of the problem, is access to capital. Now, in terms of what I think about Obama, and in terms of his plan, let me just say one more thing. People don't understand how dangerous it is what Obama did in terms of turning the black agenda over to charities. That is a dangerous thing that's a neoliberal idea. The job of democratic presidents, people who pretend or to be liberals, is to show that government can do good work, that government can do the job. When you start turning this stuff over to charities, what you're doing is basically ushering in a neo-feudal society where people exist at the behest of rich or charitable benefactors. That's what you're doing. That's not the job of government. That devalues government. That takes control out of the hands of government. And that's not what you want if you're a black person, because when you look about it, the Voting Rights Act, the Civil Rights Act, all of the changes that have impacted us in such a monumental way, those have been brought about by government action, not charities. So when you say, hey, black people, I've taken care of everybody else through the government. I did bailouts through the government. I did farm subsidies through the government. I did everything else through the government. But black people, I'm not going to do anything. I gave Israel money. I did everything through the government. But black people, here's some charity for you. And after Obama's gone, who's to say they have to continue to give that money? These are voluntary contributions. There's nothing compulsory about it. There's not a bill that backs it up and says this is the money that's allocated for it. These people can fall back at any minute and say we don't want to do this anymore. So when you allow that to happen to yourself, when you allow yourself to be devalued in that way, I just thought it was very, very disheartening. I just thought, look how far we've come. Look at black people, cheering at the idea that some charities are going to give us some money, and it's maybe a couple $100 million max that they committed to. They're not going to give what they committed to, and even that, in terms of look at the $7 billion prisons budget, and you're giving $200 million maybe in forms of charity. No, that just doesn't get it for me, and I can't say a lot of kind things about it. And people say, well, it was a big media day for Obama. He got to go out there and talk about black boys. I don't care about having a conversation. Clinton. I would have much preferred if he'd done a backdoor deal and got the money that people needed, the money that black kids needed. You don't have to give me a photo op. I don't need a photo op with you and a black boy standing beside you with a bunch of, a sea of smiling black faces. That doesn't matter to me. I'm done with the symbolism. So for me, it was, I was just disheartened by it. I mean, I really was. I can't wait for 2016 to roll around.
Well, I did say that, it didn't surprise me that they announced this initiative right before the midterm elections, to get black people excited about voting for a Democrat who doesn't look like Obama. So obviously the political motivations are there. And then also, here's one thing that's really interesting, and this goes back to the point you were making about white supremacy. And we know that white supremacy lies at the core of much of this inequality that exists. And white supremacy isn't something that was built yesterday. It's not an ideology that's just carried in the minds of people that exist today. It's built in the structure of our society, which was built over hundreds of years. But here's a fact that's interesting. Janks Morton, who made the film Hoodwinked, sent me over some data where he actually showed that African American women are number one on the list for college attendance. They attend college more than any other group of people in America. And did you know this? This might blow your mind. Did you know that black men are actually ahead of white men in college attendance? I kid you not. In terms of it is from census data in 2011, it shows that black women are number one ahead of Asians. In fact, they're a full percentage point ahead of everybody. And then you go down the list. White women are 7.1%. White men or black men are 7%. White males are 6.1%. So despite the fact that, we've now reached a point where black men and black women are going to college more than white men, black people are still making less money. Now, what I'll go deeper into on that, though, is we have to understand that, part of alleviating white supremacy, in terms of, if you look at, income gaps as one of the measuring sticks, well, one of the things that white men do that black men don't do as much of, that we have to learn how to do, is entrepreneurship. They tend to make a lot of money around the world because they go around and they create businesses and they extract resources and sell them. And I'm not saying that that's right. It's not right. I mean, irresponsible capitalism is very bad for the world. But I think in terms of just being more assertive about understanding how to make the most out of the education you get, how to create economic opportunities when someone won't give them to you, I think that's very important for black people to understand, because we got a lot of black folks that get a lot of education but end up very, very frustrated because I've got all this education and nobody's helping me, nobody's giving me anything. And I just don't believe that that's ever going to really change very much. Yvette?
Well, no, the only thing that struck me about the data about how many, black people are really in school, and leading the way, I wonder why, if we really are leading the pack and that data is true about us going to college, why do we continue to get the personal responsibility talk? If that data is true and we're leading the pack, we're number one, we're doing it, regardless of what we've been through, we're doing it. If we're doing that, then stop talking to us about personal responsibility. And I'll say this again, I'm sure, I expect President Obama to be a great dad to Sasha and Malia, but I don't need him to be the black daddy of black America. That's not something that I need at all. That's not something that I want, and that's not something that I will continue to deal with. And I'll call out every time I see it. You're not my father, so stop trying to act like it. Your job is to be an executive. You're chief. You're commander in chief. Do that. And Barack Obama seems to understand what it's like to be a good father. He seems like a good father. He doesn't understand the responsibility of being a black president, and that's where he's always falling short.
Well, I think that's a great way for us to walk out of this conversation, because I think that anybody who has a conversation about personal responsibility should understand that responsibility is a 360-degree circle. It doesn't mean that the responsibility stops and starts with the person that you're talking to. It also starts and stops with you as well. So when you talk about these gaps, this white supremacy, the educational gap, economic gap, don't just point to the things that black people might or might not be doing to alleviate that gap. Talk about the things that white people are continuing to do that have created and perpetuated this gap. If you can't talk about full responsibility, then don't talk about responsibility at all, because ultimately your whole conversation is irresponsible. So thank you for your time, Yvette. I think it's real cool we got a chance to finally get back on the mic. We need to do this more often.
I know.
Well, everybody, this is Yvette Carnell from BreakingBrown.com, and thank you all for checking us out at Your Black World. And until we meet again, please stay strong, be blessed, and be educated. We are gone. Peace.